welcome, particularly to John Ballamore, who's with me from the Southward Museum, the assistant manager, and he's going to talk to us today about the contribution of Steve Roberts to the works in the internationally famous Southward's Museum. And if you haven't been to it, come to it. So John, I'd like to just start in terms of Steve's work with you explaining, what is this here? What is it and where did it come from?
Okay, 1915, Indianapolis Stutz, only 3 ever made. I think it came third in 1915 in Indianapolis at, I think it was 87 miles an hour on average speed. Pretty terrifying in those days doing that, going round in circles. Then it did a few races in the States, and then after a while these things get dominant. They just don't want them anymore, they get too old, not very fast, other models come along. So then a guy in the States, who was a Kiwi guy in San Francisco, buys it for another guy in New Zealand. So it's shipped to New Zealand, and I can't remember what year it was, but it goes through a period of racing at Muriwai Beach. And this is the only race in New Zealand, is at Muriwai. So up and down the beaches, and that's all they used to do. So it won for many years. I think three years in a row it won the New Zealand Cup. And then it ran for about 10 years in total. So then it just goes through a lot of other people and ends up in Taranaki as a farm implement truck, basically. And I think it was a hay baler. It used to drive around and gather hay. So after that, that's where it ended up in his life.
Okay. So then it came into the hands at some point with Sir Len Southward?
Yep. He buys it off the family in Taranaki. It doesn't have its original motor, but then this guy in Auckland, Mr. Roycroft, he has the original motor for it. So Sir Len does a deal with him, gets the original motor, and then it's brought to the workshop down here at the Southward Car Museum, and it's completely stripped and rebuilt.
And at that point of rebuild, that's when Steve Roberts
comes
became
along.
Involved. Yes. And so if we get an image of what it was like, and then we look at it today, that's where it's come.
Absolutely, yeah. So Steve, you can see that Steve's handiwork here. He's made everything from the front to the back.
Wow.
You know, the radiator surrounds, the bonnet, the body, the interior is all Steve, the seats, the fuel tank, the oil tank. Right. Yeah, the original part is the chassis and the motor and the transaxle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be fair to say that Steve would be one of the leading restorer, recreator, or creator of this type of
coach work like this. Yeah.
So here we are, and Steve, perhaps we can start with the Stutz.
Yes.
We've been there down to the museum, the Southward Museum. Magnificent place, and if you haven't seen it, folks, you've got to go there. We've had a look at it, and I was just stunned that such a machine was ever built, and there it is. So what is it in your eyes, and what did you experience when you first saw that car?
Well, when I first saw the car came to New Zealand in the 20s, must be about 27 something. And the interesting thing is, when it came into New Zealand, it raced at Muriwai Beach.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know what happened to it, but it went on a farm in New Plymouth, I think it was in the end, and I'm not sure what it was doing on the farm, but tractors and things.
Yes.
And anyway, it ended up in Len Southward's museum as a total, absolute wreck would be the word to use.
And with alterations to it as well. No, in the back, back end, it had a piece put on at the back.
You wouldn't recognise it as an Indianapolis one of the trio of races
Yeah.
Stutz put on that day, in 15.
Yeah.
And anyway, Len said, we're going to have a go at this, we're going to restore it. And he said, I want to restore it as it was at Mirabai Beach in 1927 or 28, whatever year it was. Yeah. I looked at it, I said, Len, and he had a photograph of it. Mm-hmm. I said, Len, that's not the way to go. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is put it as it came out of the factory in 1915 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he was humming and hawing. We wasn't very happy about it. I said, look, Ren, I'll do the radiator shelf. I'll make a new shell for that, because that's the only original bit that we can. So I made a new shell, and that was that. Mm-hmm. Now, 6 weeks or 6 months, it was a long period, I know, in those days. He rang up and he said, well, we've thought about this. We might replicate it and do it as it was out of the factory. Yeah. Yeah. And that was all systems go. 1974, we got stuck in, and literally had the photographs to copy, which is what we did. Yeah. And then Len, clever guy he is, he knew exactly what he wanted, which is the difference. He knew exactly what he wanted, even though it was going to be from the factory. So he had done all his study work. Yeah. Yeah. We finally got to him sitting in the seat. Yeah. Yeah. And I was able to tell him, get in the car then, and then I had to make the seat for it. Yeah. Yeah. And I was able to tell him what to do, and he did it when I asked him. So
very few people would have done that.
That was right. That was my one little win. He was a very big joker, always joking.
He was a huge national figure. There's a photograph in their collection, their private collection, of Sir Len, Southward and Robert Muldoon in that Stutz.
Oh yes.
On a track somewhere, and I don't know whether we've got it, but it would be a good one to get hold of.
I know, I've got that photo.
Have you?
I've got that photo, and it was brilliant.
Yeah. Remarkable guy in terms of...
I'm full of admiration of Len Southward, and absolutely brilliant.
Yes,
the best praise I ever got from him was when we finished the R-Type MG, which was a pretty rare car, Doreen Williams' car. He rang me, he said, I've had a look at the R-Type, I think it's all right, and that was my biggest praise from Len Southward. So there you go.
And that's in the Southwood
That's in the museum,
isn't it? Yes.
And interesting seeing Muldoon in that car, in the Stutz.
Yes.
Al Unser, who was an Indianapolis winner several times, he drove the car in New Zealand, the Stutz in New Zealand, up the Steve Millen Hill. How about that?
Yeah.
An Indianapolis winner sat in the Stutz and drove it up the hill.
Yeah. We've got to get an image of that one.
I've got a photograph.
Have you?
Of that.
Good, excellent.
Ralph was actually there that day.
Was he?
He's got one shot of Al going past.
Nice. So the Stutz, the standout in terms of that job that you did over quite a long period of time, I would imagine.
Well, it wasn't that long. Once we got stuck in, we did the car. I was living in Wellington and driving up to Paraparam to the museum and working a day and then coming back.
Right.
But over a couple of weeks, it was we were under control.
Right. Yeah.
Fuel tank. It was a terrific job.
Was it? Yeah.